Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is KidLee, and this is episode 15 of the Intergalactic News Network. In this week's news, we have another round of class changes incoming. Everything I'm about to read has come from some dev postings, so we'll go ahead and start with the Spellslinger. In the next patch, we will be addressing the issue of the Spellslinger's insanely high burst and uncompetitive sustained DPS, while also diversifying its DPS builds. A few examples of these changes include Charge Shot T8 bonus, overall damage has increased and applies over time. Flame Burst will be castable while casting. Arcane Missiles becomes more mobile at base and will now deal direct damage. The T4 bonus will now restore 5 spell power on hit. For healers, Runic Healing, overall healing has been increased. The Tier 8 bonus will grant the T4 defense to the additional target as well. Vitality Burst, T5, if surged, cast time will be properly reduced to 1.3 seconds. Simply put, healing was undertuned and will be receiving a significant buff. Moving on to the Engineer, the DPS stance damage increases were causing some imbalances within combat. We have normalized assault power across all classes. Removal of the self-snare on all Engineer abilities. The bot AI improvements will include adjustments to stances so they all don't feel the same, reducing the amount of volatility gained through Reckless Dash amp, reduce the cooldown to make adjustments to target acquisition to make it less punishing to use, and made multiple adjustments to Mortar Strike to improve the ease of use. Moving on to Esper. This patch, we continue to focus on underused abilities and ability tiers. You can expect to see the following changes. New bonuses for standing still for both assault and support abilities. Updated abilities and ability tiers for Telekinetic Strike, Spectral Swarm, Haunt, Mind Burst, Illusionary Blades, Blade Dance, and Re-Up. Updated amps such as Technician, Bingo, and Mental Overflow, with the upcoming changes to assault and support power being adjusted to match other classes' superiority, was performing far better than intended and has been adjusted to compensate for that change. Next up, we have the Stalker. We are addressing some quality of life issues as well as some balance for the AoE DPS. Neutralize and Ruin will be receiving a buff to their damage. Additionally, Neutralize will stack fewer times and has had its T4 and T8 slightly reworked to increase its damage output. Bloodthirst has been reworked to give an ongoing damage buff at the base tier in addition to its lifesteal. Additionally, Tier 4 and 8 have been reworked. Simdrone has been reworked to have a CC break at base, with the upcoming changes to assault and support power being adjusted to match other classes' brutality mastery, was performing far better than intended and has been adjusted to compensate for that change. And the cooldown on stealth is or will be reset when a Stalker dies. So that is a, I don't know if you call that a change or just a bug fix, but there you go nonetheless. Moving on to Warriors, we are adding in the tank changes that have been discussed as well as adjusting the DPS rotations. Atomic Spear will be usable after Warriors' attacks are deflected and can be used while casting other abilities. Relentless Strikes T8 will now trigger every 3 seconds rather than an RNG chance. Ripsaw is getting a slight buff to its tier scaling, but its major tiers are being reworked to grant better bonuses to damage. Savage Strikes is going back on a general cooldown and is gaining a slight cooldown increase for a noticeable bump in damage, as well as having the T4 now worked on a base. Whirlwind is getting a quite noticeable buff in base damage, tier scaling, and both the major tier bonuses are being reworked to enhance the ability output, making it very strong for AoE damage. And the last class that we have is the Medic. We are adding changes to fields, as well as a bunch of quality of life changes, and a good buff to Crisis Wave. So that's sort of the overview. Onto the individuals, all fields will now apply a debuff/buff to enemies/allies that enter the field. This buff is refreshed each tick of the field as long as they remain in the field. Paralytic Surge has gone down to a 25-second cooldown. Magnetic Lockdown is now instant cast and will also interrupt casting and remove one interrupt armor. Additionally, is now off of the general cooldown. Recycler will have a 100% chance to trigger on crits with Gamma Rays or Quantum Cascade, but will have a 2-second cooldown. Crisis Wave will take increase in focus cost to gain a lot of healing output. Additionally, it will now prioritize allies missing the most health. The Tier 4 will now allow Crisis Wave to be cast once every 8 seconds with no actuator cost. Tier 8 will now grant a significant healing bonus to allies under 30%. And finally, sort of wrapping up the news for the day, I would just like to add that overall, WildStar has a lot of changes in the works for the core game. You know, changes from the rune system to raid and dungeon token drops to crafting and much, much more. I think 6 months or a year down the road, we could be looking at a completely different game in many aspects. So it'll be really interesting to see how things turn out. So let's go ahead and move on to some dev chat. Wouldn't it be great to have some animations with housing decor? Especially working doors, sliding doors, opening doors, maybe elevators, lifts, interactive things. And you can see here the devs responded as you wish. So that'll be really cool once they actually get that stuff in game. We have some crafting changes on the way, as seen here in this dev post. It reads, so these past couple of weeks we have been looking closely at all coordinated crafting trade skills, and we have been implementing some quality of life changes to these systems. I personally have been going through Architect and adjusting the crafting target sizes and locations to make them much less dependent on getting lucky with the RNG in order to hit some of the targets. While going through these, I fixed a lot of bugs with the tech tree, discovery and crafting targets overlapping, and turning schematics that are always locked into discoverables as they were intended to be. These changes are only just happening on our development server, so they'll have to make their normal rounds through testing before they'll find their way onto the live servers. And finally, for those who did not hear the news, Jeremy Gaffney is stepping down as the president of Carbine Studios. He said in this post, I am not leaving entirely. I'll be adopting more of a consulting role going forward with Carbine. So we definitely wish him luck during this process. And that will go ahead and do it for this week's episode of the Intergalactic News Network. So with that being said, everybody keep playing and have fun.